Captain Alina Reyes stood on the bridge of the TSS Tenacity, Earth's newest stealth destroyer, as it drifted silently at the edge of contested space. Her scarred hands gripped the railing, knuckles white against her olive skin. Through the viewport, the vastness of space lay before them, seemingly empty, but her trained eyes detected the subtle distortions that betrayed the presence of approaching vessels. Silari warships entering the sector, Captain. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice was barely above a whisper, an unnecessary precaution that had nonetheless become habit among the crew. 3 capital ships, Imperator class. The holographic display materialized, showing 3 massive vessels entering the sector. Their hulls were adorned with the distinctive trophies of conquered species, skeletal remains and fragments of destroyed ships incorporated into their armor as grisly decoration. Maintain silent running, Rise ordered, though the command was redundant. The Tenacity hadn't broadcast so much as a quantum whisper since departing Earth space 3 weeks ago. Chief Engineer McAllister approached with a tablet displaying the ship's revolutionary dampening systems, technology no alien race had mastered. Perfect void silence. The Galactic Concord had dismissed humanity as primitives playing with toys, but they didn't know about Project Phantom. Dampening systems operating at 97% efficiency, Captain McAllister reported, his Scottish brogue softened to match the hushed atmosphere of the bridge. We're quieter than the background radiation. The tension on the bridge was palpable as the alien vessels lumbered closer, their massive engines blazing with excess energy. Unlike human ships designed for efficiency and stealth, the Silari vessels were monuments to intimidation. Every surface designed to project power, every system broadcasting their presence, as if daring the universe to challenge them. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, Communications Officer Rodriguez noted, her fingers dancing across her console as she intercepted the alien transmissions. Standard sweep patterns, looking for human vessels. The Tenacity's bridge crew watched in tense silence as the alien vessels passed by, so close that the viewport briefly darkened from their shadow. The auxiliary ships announced their presence with blazing energy signatures and quantum disturbances, while the Tenacity existed as nothing more than a ghost, its revolutionary technology concealing not just communications but its very existence. Tactical Officer Chen's eyes narrowed as the targeting system automatically locked onto the lead Silari flagship's exposed reactor housing, a kill shot they wouldn't take. Not yet. Their rear quadrant defenses are minimal, Chen observed quietly. They're not even considering an attack from behind. Why would they? Rise replied. The Galactic Concord told them we're primitive savages barely capable of interstellar flight. Intelligence Officer Wei smiled thinly from her station. The Silari diplomatic communique referred to us as vermin to be exterminated before we contaminate their expansion territories. Rise watched as the Silari warships continued their patrol, completely oblivious to the human vessel mere kilometers away. The irony wasn't lost on her. These self-proclaimed apex predators of the galaxy, hunting for human ships while the human destroyers sat in their blind spot, watching, recording, and waiting. Let them hunt for human vermin, Rise said, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of an apex predator. They haven't realized that in this equation, they're not the hunters. She turned to her crew, each face illuminated by the soft blue glow of their stations. We have what we came for. Log their patrol patterns, weapon configurations, and communication protocols. We're the first humans to observe Silari warships this closely and live to tell about it. As the Tenacity prepared to withdraw, maintaining its perfect silence, Rise allowed herself a small predatory smile. Humanity had been dismissed by the galaxy for too long. Soon, they would learn what Earth had always known. The most dangerous predators aren't the ones that roar. They're the ones that strike from silence. The damaged refugee vessel tumbled through space, trailing debris and atmosphere in a glittering wake. Its distress call pierced the void on an emergency frequency. This is the Artemis Colony transport, under attack from Silari forces. 200 civilians aboard. Please help." The transmission cut to static as the vessel's communications array finally failed. Captain Rice watched from the Tenacity's bridge as the 3 Xilari warships changed course, converging on the helpless human transport. The lead vessel's weapon systems began charging, energy blooms forming along its lateral arrays. "They're going to finish it off," Commander Chen said, his expression grim. 2 minutes until they're in optimal firing range. In the dimmed bridge, Chen presented Captain Rice with their options through text on his tablet: maintain silent running and preserve their strategic advantage, or break silence to save the refugees and potentially lose humanity's only stealth vessel. Senior officers exchanged tense glances. 200 lives against potentially billions if they lost the stealth advantage. Rice's fingers drummed once on the arm of her command chair before she made her decision. "Neither. Prepare for ghost maneuver." Engineering Officer McAllister's face drained of color. "Captain, the dampening system isn't rated for." "Make it work," she interrupted. "Those are our people." The order cascaded through the ship. Within seconds, the Tenacity plunged into darkness. Emergency lighting only, life support reduced to minimal levels. The temperature dropped rapidly as non-essential systems went offline. The crew donned thermal gear, their movements practiced and precise despite the sudden cold. McAllister pushed the dampening systems beyond safety parameters, his fingers flying across frost-covered controls as warning lights flickered and died one by one. "Now we're truly silent," he whispered, his breath visible in the cold air. "We're absorbing more ambient radiation than we're emitting. To any sensors, we're colder than the surrounding space." The Tenacity glided toward the refugee ship using only momentum and minuscule gas vents for course corrections. No engines, no thrusters, nothing that could generate a detectable signature. The bridge crew worked in near silence, communicating through hand signals and tablets. "This is how our ancestors hunted," Dr. Okafor, the science officer, noted quietly. "Before we had language, before we had tools, we had patience and coordination." As they passed within visual range of a Xilari destroyer, the alien vessel's searchlights swept across their position. The crew froze as one, holding their breath. The searchlight passed over them, seeing nothing but stars and empty space where a 300-meter warship hung in the void. "Primitive instincts," Okafor continued, her voice barely audible. "Sometimes the oldest survival techniques work best, even in the void." Lieutenant Jackson worked with Security Chief Alvarez to prepare boarding parties. They would have one chance to transfer survivors before the Xilari discovered them. "We'll need to time this perfectly," Alvarez murmured as her team checked vacuum-sealed weapons. "The moment we make contact with the transport, our position is compromised." "Then we'll be fast," Jackson replied. "In and out before they can target us." Captain Rice studied the tactical display, where the refugee ship now floated helplessly between 3 converging Xilari warships. The aliens were taking their time, savoring the hunt, unaware they were being stalked in turn. "The Xilari believe themselves to be apex predators," Rice said softly. "But they evolved from herd animals. They never learned the patience of a true hunter." The Tenacity continued its silent approach, now just kilometers from the refugee vessel. On the bridge, Rodriguez monitored the Xilari communications with growing tension. "They're discussing how to disable the transport's engines to take prisoners," she reported. "They want test subjects." Reyes's expression hardened. "Not while we're here. Prepare boarding teams. We'll evacuate those civilians and be gone before the Xilari realize what happened." As the Tenacity closed the final distance to the crippled transport, Chief McAllister approached the captain one last time. "I've pushed the dampening field as far as it can go," he said. "But the moment we extend docking tubes, we'll light up on their sensors like a nova." Reyes nodded. "Then we make every second count. This is what we trained for." She rose from her command chair, her silhouette barely visible in the dim red emergency lighting. Around her, the crew of the Tenacity prepared for the moment they would break their perfect silence, not with a roar of defiance, but with the quiet efficiency of predators who had stalked their prey across the stars. Science Officer Dr. Sophia Okafor's laboratory was the only section of the Tenacity still fully powered, its energy consumption hidden within the ambient radiation of nearby stellar bodies. The rescued refugees had been settled in the cargo hold, transformed into emergency accommodations, while the ship maintained its silent vigil at the edge of the Silari fleet's sensor range. Captain Rice entered the lab to find Okafor studying holographic displays of Silari physiology. The dark-skinned scientist barely looked up from her work, her fingers tracing patterns across xenobiological displays showing Silari nervous system responses. "You wanted to see me, Doctor?" Rice asked. Okafor nodded, gesturing toward the central display. "I've been analyzing our encounters with the Silari, particularly their reaction when they lost track of the refugee ship. Their response patterns were revealing." She expanded the display to show comparative evolutionary trees. Human on one side, Silari on the other. Humans evolved as persistence hunters, Captain. Our ancestors could track prey for days in patient silence, moving quietly, waiting for the right moment. Our brains are wired for it. Patience, planning, delayed gratification. The display shifted to show Silari evolutionary history. The Silari descended from herd omnivores. They survived through strength in numbers and constant communication. Look at their ships, every surface designed to intimidate, every system broadcasting power. They never developed the concept of stealth because they never needed it. Rice leaned closer, studying the neural mapping of Silari brain structures. "You're saying they psychologically can't comprehend our tactics?" "Their psychology cannot understand a predator that waits in absolute silence," Okafor confirmed. "It doesn't fit their evolutionary framework. It's why their ships broadcast power signatures so carelessly. They cannot imagine an enemy that would choose to hide rather than intimidate." Lieutenant Commander Jackson, weapons specialist, entered with new sensor data. His eyes lit up with understanding as he caught the tail end of the conversation. "That's why their defenses all face outward in a sphere," he said, bringing up tactical scans of Silari warships. "But there are gaps, blind spots they don't even know they have, because they're not looking for an enemy that stalks." "Precisely," Okafor nodded. "They're watching for frontal threats, for enemies that announce themselves with shows of force. Their entire combat doctrine is based on overwhelming displays of power." Jackson's fingers traced the peculiar defense arrangement of the Silari vessels. "They're prepared for head-on confrontation, not ambush. They've spent millennia evolving to watch for threats charging at them from the plains," Okafor said. "But never learned to look for the shadow in the grass," Rice finished, a plan forming in her mind as she watched the Silari's thundering approach on a nearby display. The captain turned to Communications Officer Rodriguez, who had just entered with a data tablet. "What have you learned from their communications?" "They refer to combat as confrontation ritual," Rodriguez explained. "Their language doesn't even have words for ambush or stealth attack. The closest translation is dishonor tactic." Rice nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. "So to them, our entire strategy isn't just unexpected, it's incomprehensible. And that gives us an advantage beyond technology," Okafor said. "Their psychology isn't equipped to adapt to an enemy they can't see or understand." As if to underline her point, the tactical display showed the Silari vessels still searching in expanding patterns for the missing refugee ship, their massive engines blazing, their communication arrays broadcasting continuously. "They're like hunters who've never been hunted," Jackson observed. "They don't know what it feels like to be prey." Rice studied the display, watching the Silari ship's predictable search patterns. "Then we're about to teach them." She turned to her officers, her expression resolute. "We've watched them long enough. Now we know their weaknesses, their blind spots, not just in their ships, but in their minds." "What are you planning, Captain?" Okafor asked. They expect a confrontation, Rise replied, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had earned her command of humanity's most advanced vessel. A direct challenge, ship to ship, weapon to weapon. We won't give them that. She gestured to the display showing the auxiliary fleet. Instead, we'll be the predator they never evolved to fear, the one that strikes from silence, the one they never see coming. Outside the viewport, the stars glittered cold and distant as the Tenacity prepared to teach the self-proclaimed masters of the galaxy what it truly meant to be hunted. Target their stern propulsion manifolds only, Captain Rice ordered as the Tenacity drifted into position behind the Lid Auxiliary warship. Minimal energy signature, precise angles. I want us gone before they know we were here. The bridge was bathed in red emergency lighting as Tactical Officer Chen calibrated the weapon systems with microscopic precision. The air crackled with tension as crew members moved with deliberate care, each action measured and controlled. Silent targeting confirmed, Chen reported, his voice barely audible above the ship's dampened systems. Firing solutions calculated for maximum effect with minimal signature. The massive Auxiliary flagship floated before them, its ornate hull gleaming in the light of distant stars. Nearly 5 times the size of the Tenacity, it bristled with weapons capable of reducing entire planets to molten slag. Yet for all its power, it resembled a grazing herbivore, oblivious to the predator at its heels. "They're scanning for us," Rodriguez warned from communications, her fingers dancing across her console. "Standard sweep patterns. They know something's out there, but can't pinpoint us." "They're looking in all the wrong places," Wei added from intelligence, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "Their search algorithms are designed to find power signatures and radiation trails." Weapons Officer Jackson's fingers hovered over the firing controls, his breathing slow and measured. "Ready on your command, Captain." Ray studied the holographic display, showing all 3 auxiliary ships, calculating trajectories and response times. The lead vessel's propulsion system glowed on the tactical overlay, their target. "Fire," she ordered, her voice calm. The Tenacity's weapons discharged with surgical precision, not the overwhelming barrage alien races had come to expect from warfare, but precise, minimal energy pulses that struck the lead vessel's propulsion system from angles that couldn't be traced back to their origin. The effect was immediate. The Auxiliary flagship shuddered, its massive engines sputtering into darkness. Emergency systems flared along its hull as it began to drift, its momentum carrying it forward, but its ability to maneuver crippled. Chaos erupted across alien communication channels as the other 2 ships began firing wildly into empty space, their weapons discharging in all directions. "They can't understand what's happening," Intelligence Officer Wei translated from her station, a smile playing across her lips. "The commander is demanding to know what invisible force has attacked them. He's accusing the other ships of friendly fire." The Tenacity glided silently between the panicking auxiliary vessels as they continued firing at shadows. The human ship's dampening field absorbed the stray energy from nearby weapon discharges, rendering it effectively invisible, even to visual confirmation. "We could destroy them all right now," Jackson observed, his targeting systems locked on critical weaknesses in the auxiliary vessels. "They wouldn't see it coming." "That's not our mission," Rice replied. "We're here to demonstrate capability, not to start a war we can't yet win." As the auxiliary vessels fired increasingly erratic patterns into empty space, the Tenacity completed its silent withdrawal, leaving the alien fleet in disarray. From her command chair, Rice watched the confusion unfold with quiet satisfaction. Status report. Dampening systems functioning at normal parameters, Engineering Officer McAllister reported. "They didn't get so much as a glimpse of us." "Auxiliary communications are in chaos," Wei added, listening through her headset. "They're demanding reinforcements, claiming they were attacked by. They don't even have words for what happened. The closest translation is void ghost." Rodriguez looked up from her station with a smile. The refugee transport has cleared the system under escort from the mining station patrol. All civilians safe. Reyes nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. Mission accomplished. We continued monitoring auxiliary communications, her expression growing more amused by the moment. Captain, they're implementing new security protocols, but they're all based on detecting power signatures and visible threats. They're completely missing the point. They can't comprehend what they haven't evolved to fear, Dr. Okafor remarked from her science station. They're strengthening the wrong defenses. As the tenacity cleared the system boundary, Wei listened to one final transmission from the auxiliary commander. She turned to Captain Rice, her expression serious despite the victory. They've never been hunted before, she observed with grim satisfaction. Now they're learning how it feels. Rice nodded, studying the tactical display as the auxiliary fleet diminished behind them. What they had accomplished today would change the shape of interstellar warfare forever, not through overwhelming force, but through the quiet application of an evolutionary truth. The most dangerous predator is the one you never see coming. Set course for Sanctuary Deep, she ordered. We have a report to deliver. As the tenacity disappeared into the void, it left behind a new emotion in the auxiliary fleet, one their species had rarely experienced in their long history of conquest. Fear. The hidden human outpost Sanctuary Deep materialized before them, an asteroid base concealed within a nebulous swirling gases. To the casual observer, it appeared to be nothing more than a mineral-rich rock drifting among thousands of others. To those who knew where to look, it was humanity's most classified military installation outside Earth's solar system. As the tenacity docked and the rescued refugees disembarked, Captain Reyes observed the efficiency of the base's personnel. Within hours, the civilians were processed, treated, and settled into temporary quarters. Their harrowing experience would make them valuable intelligence assets. They had seen the auxiliary up close and lived to tell about it. Admiral Harrison awaited them in the secure briefing room, his weathered face grim beneath the blue-tinged emergency lighting. At 62, Harrison was a veteran of Earth's earliest interstellar conflicts. The scars visible on his face hinted at countless others, hidden beneath his immaculate uniform. Your ghost maneuver worked, Captain, he said without preamble, activating a holographic star chart that filled the center of the room. But you've stirred up one hell of a hornet's nest. The display showed hundreds of auxiliary vessels converging from across the sector, a fleet of unprecedented size. Rice felt her crew's collective breath catch at the sight. They're calling it the Extermination Armada, Harrison continued, manipulating the display to zoom in on the flagship, a vessel nearly twice the size of any they'd encountered before. They intend to scour every cubic meter of space until they find how we've achieved invisibility. The auxiliary emperor himself has declared that humanity must be eradicated before our dishonorable technology spreads to other species. Intelligence Officer Wei stepped forward, studying the display. Sir, we're monitoring communications from other Concord species. They're watching with unusual interest. The auxiliary have never appeared this rattled. Because they've never faced humans before, Harrison replied, a predatory glint in his eyes. He activated another display showing 5 vessels similar to the Tenacity but with distinct modifications. You're not alone anymore, Captain. Meet the Ghost Fleet. Ray studied the ships with growing amazement, each with unique capabilities but sharing the same core silence technology. I thought the Tenacity was a prototype. That's what we wanted everyone to believe, Harrison said. Even most of the Admiralty thinks you're flying our only stealth vessel, but we've been busy. He'd highlighted each ship in turn. Nightshade, Spectre, Wraith, Phantom, and Revenant. Harrison identified them. Together with Tenacity, you form humanity's response to being outnumbered and outgunned. Reyes examined the specifications with growing appreciation. Nightshade was optimized for electronic warfare, Spectre for reconnaissance, Wraith for assassination strikes against command vessels, Phantom for infiltration, and Revenant for rescue operations. Together with the balanced capabilities of the Tenacity, they formed a formidable force, if used correctly. "What are our orders?" Rise asked, already suspecting the answer. "Don't run from the Xilari Armada," Harrison confirmed, his voice taking on an edge that reminded Reyes that before he was an admiral, he had been a hunter. "Hunt it." The admiral leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper that nonetheless filled the room. "They expect us to either hide or charge. Instead, we'll stalk them until their own fear tears them apart." The assembled officers exchanged glances, a mix of apprehension and determination. They were being asked to implement a strategy never before attempted in interstellar warfare: psychological operations against an entire fleet. "The captains of the other vessels have been briefed," Harrison continued. "You'll coordinate through quantum entanglement, completely undetectable. Each ship has its assignment, but you'll operate with broad autonomy. The only rule is, don't get caught, and don't engage in direct confrontation unless absolutely necessary." As the briefing concluded, Engineer McAllister approached Rice with a tablet displaying new calculations. "Captain, I've analyzed what happened during the Ghost maneuver. I think I can push our stealth capabilities even further." Rice examined the data, impressed by her engineer's ingenuity. "How so?" "We can modulate our dampening field to create false readings, phantom ships that appear briefly on sensors before vanishing. We could make them think they're surrounded." For the first time since the mission began, Rice smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her usually stern features. "Perfect. The Xilari believe they're the great hunters of the galaxy. Let's show them what it's like to be the prey." As the crew prepared to depart, Dr. Okafor shared one final observation. "Captain, there's something you should know about herd animals when they're hunted. When they can't see the predator, they become increasingly paranoid, often turning on each other in their confusion." Rice nodded, the implications clear. "Then we make sure they never see us coming." The Tenacity disengaged from Sanctuary Deep, slipping back into the void alongside its sister ships. As the Ghost Fleet dispersed to their hunting grounds, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, witnessing the beginning of a new kind of warfare. One fought not with overwhelming firepower, but with silence and shadow. Another successful strike, Chen reported as the Tenacity pulled away from its Xilari communications vessel, now drifting powerless, but with life support intact. "That's the third ship we've disabled in the fleet's forward scouting formation." Through the viewport, the distant lights of other Ghost Fleet vessels briefly flickered visible before disappearing again, a prearranged signal that their assigned targets had also been neutralized. Captain Rice nodded in satisfaction as she studied the holographic display of the massive Xilari Armada, now spidered with red marks indicating disabled systems, compromised communications, and false sensor data points. 3 weeks into Operation Silent Hunt, the once mighty Extermination Armada was beginning to show signs of strain. The Ghost Fleet had implemented a campaign of psychological warfare unlike anything seen in galactic history, never engaging in direct combat, but instead undertaking surgical strikes that left the Xilari increasingly paranoid and confused. In the science lab, Dr. Rivera, the medical officer, worked alongside Dr. Okafor, analyzing Xilari biological responses to prolonged stress. The holographic display showed neural scans obtained from captured medical data. Their neurotransmitter analogs become increasingly unstable under constant low-level threat, Rivera explained, highlighting patterns that pulsed with increasing irregularity. They evolved to handle direct confrontation, not the anticipation of an attack that never fully materializes. Rice studied the data with interest. "So we're literally driving them mad. Their psychology can't process an enemy they never see," Okafor confirmed. "Each pattern we establish, then break, increases their neural chaos. They're programmed to expect clear confrontation, challenge, response, resolution. Instead, we give them uncertainty, which their brains aren't equipped to handle." The two scientists had developed a precise schedule of attacks designed to maximize psychological impact, striking at irregular intervals, sometimes hitting critical systems, other times merely disabling non-essential components. The unpredictability was as damaging as the actual attacks. On the bridge, Intelligence Officer Wei monitored intercepted Silari communications with growing satisfaction. "Captain, they're beginning to suspect infiltrators among their own ranks. The 3rd and 7th battle groups are refusing to share tactical data with each other." The Tenacity glided silently toward its next target, a sensor array ship on the Armada's flank. This time, they wouldn't disable it but instead upload doctored data showing human ships where there were none. "Execute upload," Rise ordered once they were in position. Within hours, 2 Silari dreadnoughts fired on each other after the falsified sensor readings triggered their automated defense systems. The resulting explosion illuminated the Tenacity's bridge momentarily as the crew watched in solemn silence. "We don't need to destroy their ships," Captain Reyes observed quietly. "They'll do it themselves if we just apply the right pressure." Engineering Officer McAllister's innovations had proven invaluable. The Ghost Fleet now regularly deployed phantom signatures that appeared briefly on Silari sensors before vanishing, convincing them they were surrounded by hundreds of human vessels rather than just 6. "The beauty of it is," McAllister explained after another successful deployment, "they're spending massive resources trying to develop countermeasures for technology that doesn't even exist. They think we have some kind of advanced cloaking system, when really we're just very, very quiet." The psychological effects compounded daily. As the Ghost Fleet continued its campaign of misinformation and strategic strikes, the once organized Silari Armada began to resemble a wounded animal thrashing in confusion. Dangerous still, but increasingly harmful to itself. Latest intelligence update. Wei reported after intercepting new communications. 3 more ships have gone dark, not from our attacks, but because their own commanders took them offline, convinced they'd been compromised. "And the Concord observers?" Rise asked, referring to the neutral vessels monitoring the conflict from a distance. "Fascinated," Wei replied with a rare smile. "The Archivist Guild has officially classified this as unprecedented warfare methodology. Several species have requested observer status." Reyes nodded, studying the display where Silari ships now maintained unsafe distances from each other, trust completely eroded. The fleet that had set out to exterminate humanity was slowly destroying itself, all without a single direct battle. "It won't be long now," she observed. "Every day, their command structure fractures further." In her private log that evening, Reyes recorded an observation that would later be included in military academies throughout human space. The Silari built their empire on the psychology of intimidation, an evolutionary strategy that served them well against similar species. Against humans, evolved from patient hunters who thrived on silence and stealth, their psychological infrastructure is collapsing. They came to exterminate vermin and instead found themselves hunted by predators they'd never evolved to fear. The confrontation grows quiet not because the conflict is ending, but because one side finally understands the nature of the true apex predator. The Silari fleet lay in disarray, several ships abandoned by crews driven to panic, others actively firing on former allies. Many fled back to Silari space. What began as an extermination force now resembled the aftermath of a battle, though no true battle had been fought. On the bridge of the Tenacity, the crew monitored the remaining Silari vessels with exhausted satisfaction. Weeks of continuous psychological warfare had taken their toll on both sides, though only one understood the true nature of the conflict. Nightshade reports successful disabling of another command relay. Communications Officer Rodriguez announced, reading the quantum-encrypted message from their sister ship. Spectre has completed its reconnaissance of the remaining fleet strength. We're down to approximately 37 operational Silari vessels, from an original count of 218. The numbers were staggering, a nearly 80% reduction in enemy forces without a single direct confrontation. The Ghost Fleet had perfected the art of invisible warfare, striking at communication systems, sensor arrays, and most devastatingly, the auxiliary commanders' trust in each other. Incoming transmission, Rodriguez announced suddenly, surprise evident in her voice. It's being broadcast on all frequencies, directed specifically at us. At us? Rise asked, frowning. How could they know our location? They don't. Intelligence Officer Wei clarified. They're broadcasting omnidirectionally, hoping we'll hear. It's from Admiral Vorthak's command vessel. Put it through, Rise ordered. The holographic display flickered to show Admiral Vorthak, Supreme Commander of the Auxiliary Forces. Once imposing, his scaled face now showed signs of extreme stress, darkened eye ridges, and trembling mandibles. Humans, he hissed, his translator barely keeping up with his agitated speech patterns. I know you are watching. Your shadow tactics may work against my subordinates, but I see the truth. You are not gods of the void. You are cowards, afraid to face real warriors. His massive fist pounded a control panel. I, Admiral Vorthak, last true commander of the Imperial Fleet, challenged the captain of the Ghost ship to face me. One ship against one ship, honorable combat, no more of these tricks. Come out of the shadows if you have any courage. As the transmission ended, the bridge erupted in debate. Strategic Officer Mitchell argued it was clearly a trap, while Weapons Officer Jackson saw an opportunity to neutralize the auxiliary leadership. Captain Rice listened silently, considering options that satisfied neither honor nor pragmatism. What if we did both? She finally said, silencing the debate. Engineer McAllister, can you extend our holographic communications array to project directly onto their bridge? McAllister blinked in surprise. Yes, but we'd need to be practically on top of them without being detected. Then that's what we'll do, Rice decided. Commander Chen, plot an approach vector that uses their own ship's energy signature to mask our presence. Hours later, the Tenacity sat mere kilometers from Admiral Vorthak's command vessel, so close they could see the auxiliary crew through viewports. Using the alien ship's massive power emissions as cover, they prepared the holographic projection. Ready, Captain, McAllister confirmed. Rice stood, straightening her uniform. Project in 3, 2, 1. On the auxiliary bridge, Captain Rice's image materialized without warning, not as a communication screen, but as if she stood physically among them. The alien crew recoiled in shock, weapons drawn uselessly against a projection. Admiral Vorthak rose from his command chair, mandibles spread in a display of threat and astonishment. Reyes's hologram looked directly at him, her expression calm but unyielding. She spoke only 4 words before McAllister cut the projection. We are already here. The Tenacity slipped away as sensor readings showed the auxiliary command ship systems shutting down one by one. Not from attack, but from their own crew's panic and subsequent emergency protocols. The last great warship of the extermination fleet went dark, adrift among the stars. The Galactic Concord Assembly Hall, never before visited by humans, gleamed with artificial light reflecting off the representatives of 200 species. At the center of the chamber, the peace delegation from Earth sat opposite the diminished auxiliary contingent. Admiral Vorthak, once the proud commander of an extermination fleet, now led a delegation of surrender. Captain Rice, now wearing formal diplomatic attire but still carrying herself with a predator's poise, addressed the assembly as holoprojectors displayed the events of what historians were already calling the Silent War. The Auxiliary Empire has agreed to withdraw from human colonial territories and pay reparations for their attacks on civilian outposts, she announced to the gathered representatives. In return, Earth agrees to share limited technological innovations with the Concord Scientific Exchange. The auxiliary ambassador, unable to contain himself, rose from his seat. Before we proceed, we demand to see the super weapon that allowed human ships to become invisible. The Concord must regulate such technology or risk the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber as species that once dismissed humanity now eyed the Earth delegation with newfound wariness. Captain Rice allowed the moment to extend, the silence itself becoming a demonstration of human patience. Finally, she activated a holographic display showing the evolutionary history of Earth's predator species alongside the development of human military doctrine. "There is no superweapon," she explained, her voice carrying effortlessly through the now silent chamber. "What you witnessed was not advanced technology alone, but human evolutionary psychology applied to space warfare." She highlighted the Tenacity's dampening systems, impressive but not miraculous. "Our advantage was never just technological. It was conceptual. You built your ships to be seen and feared. We built ours to hunt." The Concord representatives shifted uncomfortably as the implications sank in. The archivist of the Concord, an ancient being rarely moved to speech, rose slowly. "In 50,000 cycles of recorded galactic history," the archivist intoned, "we have documented the rise of 17 spacefaring species descended from predator evolution. All eventually failed because they could not overcome their instinct to dominate through displays of power." The chamber grew perfectly still as the archivist turned to regard humanity's representatives. "You are the first to embrace your predatory nature while transcending its limitations. This is unprecedented." 3 cycles later, humanity was welcomed into the Galactic Concord, not as junior members but as equals. The Ghost Fleet doctrine had fundamentally changed interstellar combat theory, with species throughout the galaxy now struggling to adapt ships and tactics to concepts they had never before considered. Captain Rice, soon to be Admiral Reyes, stood on the Tenacity's observation deck, watching alien vessels of various species practicing new stealth maneuvers in the distance. Engineer McAllister joined her, datapad in hand. "Their attempts at stealth are still clumsy," he noted, highlighting energy signatures still visible to human sensors. "They're trying to copy our technology, but they don't understand the philosophy behind it." Reyes nodded. "They can copy our dampening fields and our tactical systems, but they can't copy millions of years of evolution as pursuit predators. Their ships still betray them because they're still thinking like herd animals." "So we'll always have the advantage?" McAllister asked. Reyes watched as a auxiliary vessel attempted a stealth approach, its energy signature flaring at regular intervals like a heartbeat it couldn't quiet. "The galaxy has been shaped by herd species for too long," she observed quietly. "Now it's learning what it means when the predator joins the conversation, and the confrontation grows quiet." In the distance, the stars glittered cold and ancient. They had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, countless strategies of war and peace, but in all that time, they had never seen anything quite like humanity, the species that turned silence itself into a weapon. As the Tenacity prepared to return to Earth for its refit and upgrade, Reyes made one final log entry. "We came to the stars thinking we were behind, disadvantaged by our late arrival to the galactic stage. We were wrong. The very traits that made us human, patience, stealth, the ability to coordinate without noise, the instinct to wait for the perfect moment to strike. These weren't handicaps. They were advantages no other species possessed. The auxiliary thought they were hunting vermin. Instead, they awoke the most dangerous predator the galaxy has ever known." The quiet hum of the Tenacity's systems was the only sound as the ship disappeared once more into the void, leaving no trace of its passing, just as humanity's ancestors had done when stalking prey across ancient Earth. The hunter had gone home, but the galaxy would never forget the lesson it had learned. The most dangerous conversation is the one that grows quiet.